Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining, and especially thank you for some of the guys that have joined so early in the morning. I appreciate it, and I hope that you will find something of value that you will be able to use and help you in your Power BI development. So I've been asked to deliver this session by a few people because when you open Tabular Editor, there's a lot. So this session is designed to sort of get you started. So who am I? And why should I be doing this? Well, this is me. I'm on LinkedIn, Sue Bays, all one word. And I work as an independent Power BI developer. I have my own business. So I have to bill on my time. And so time for me is a critical factor. If I can do things quicker, faster, more efficiently, then I get to bill more. So, and I like running. So I like to go out running. So it's more effective for me. I'm not employed by Tabular Editor. I don't even have a T-shirt, Johnny. I don't even have a T-shirt nor a hat. So there is no employment by Tabular Editor, but they are incredibly supportive. And when I first put together this talk for Data Relay, I think is the first time I delivered it. Then Daniel, who wrote Tabular Editor, he's the main author. He sat and listened to my presentation for an hour and gave me his feedback and time. And so I find the team as a whole are really supportive. And that's where you can find me, database.co.uk. And I also run Devon and Cornwall Meetup Group. So there's a link to that. And part of the remit of the group is we're looking for new speakers. I like to give new speakers an opportunity to speak once a month. So find me and contact me. So to go straight into it, what is Tabular Editor? Who uses it? Why do they use it? How will you start and how much it'll cost? So I hope by the end of this session that you will have some answers to those questions. Please feel free to put questions in the chat. Johnny is a great fan of Tabular Editor and uses it as well, so he'll be able to help, or I'll help, but please. And I like interaction. If I don't have interaction, I think you've all gone to sleep and I feed off the interaction. So you'll get a much better presentation for me if you talk to me. So in a nutshell, what is it? It's a Windows desktop application. There are two versions, Tabular Editor 2 and Tabular Editor 3. So basically, you just download it from the internet. Tabular Editor 2 is completely free. And let me just pull in the link for you so that you can see it. You can search for Tabular Editor 2 and you have Tabular Editor 2. It's completely free. It's for the community. It will always be free. Tabular Editor 3 is a commercial. You pay for a license, and I've got costings later, but it's not expensive. It's, I think, just about £8 a month for one desktop license that you can use on two machines. And the way I look at it is it only has to save me less than half an hour a month, and it's paid for itself. So many of the features I'll be showing you today are used within Tabular Editor 2 and will help you within Tabular Editor 2. So there's no point going through it, because if you haven't used Tabular Editor 2, these won't make any difference to you. But a lot of what I contact, although I'll be showing it on Tabular Editor 3, you can use in Tabular Editor 2. So what does it actually do? So what it does is it basically allows you to view and edit all of your data models. So when you open up Power BI, we have a data model, and you can then edit that data model either using Fabric, Premium, Desktop, Analysis Services, or SQL Server 2016 plus. It saves time. So basically, as I said, and it helps you to make better data models. So it'll actually look at your model and give you suggestions for improvement. It's a massive and really powerful tool. But the bit I'm going to focus on today, because I haven't got a great deal of time, is Power BI Desktop. How you use Tabular Editor when you open your Power BI model on your desktop, and then you connect to it through Power BI. So just very quickly, I'm going to show you what a TOM is, what the TOM model is, and refer to it. But basically, when you have your data within Power BI, it's surrounded by what I think of in Talk is a wrapper, and that wrapper gives you information on where your data source is, what the tables are, what the relationships are, and it gives you lots of information about how the data within your Power BI data set is stored and formatted and everything that makes it the way that it is. So I'll be referring a lot to a TOM model, and I just thought it would be useful just to explain what the TOM model is. That's a quick idea, of the costing. So I use this one, which is the desktop. So who would use Power BI Desktop? Someone like me, a desktop analyst, Power BI developer who uses and creates all of the models, the visuals, the relationships, etc. But it can also be used by a support engineer who can dial in and just basic dial in, that's an old term, but basically can look at the models itself. Look at the TOM models without the data and understand how they're working. It can be used by a data model developer, and it can be used by a solution architect to look at how you actually go from development through to production and make sure that your models are all in the right place. Again, this is the part that I'm specifically going to be talking about. So how does it make your models faster? And I will show you this. But basically, it allows us to automate tasks, so we can create many measures all in one go. We can write scripts. We can use macros to actually do the same thing time and time again. We can format. We can do all sorts of things. It helps us optimize our data model. It has Vertipack within Tabular Editor, so we can understand the structure of our models. It can also look at our models and give us suggestions on how to improve it. It helps us write DAX, and anything that helps me write DAX has got to be good for me. It's got a lovely DAX editor in it, and if we make mistakes, it gives us little reasons why, and it'll pull up the guides, but I'll show you this. And also it helps us unlock some of the advanced modeling features. I know calculation groups is now in preview in desktop, but before that you could only use Tabular Editor. But we can also create perspectives and all sorts of things. So this basically is what I'm going to show you, and this is to remind me to make sure I show you all of this, because there's quite a lot and I can get a bit carried away. So we're going to go through all these things and show you how they work. So to start with, this is the model that I'm going to be using. It's training for marathons. I've got Florence in 3 weeks. So within this, I've pulled in my Garmin data. So what you'll be interested in specifically is my model. So date table, and I've got these different fact tables, which basically, what I want to do, what I'm doing, and different things. So it's your normal Power BI model. And these are my tables and these are my measures. So it's what you would expect from a Power BI report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up Power BI Desktop, Tabular Editor. Tabular Editor is stored on my desktop, so it just basically sits down the same way you would open Power BI Desktop. I've got it as a short key, and it's going to open and go onto the other screen. So just checking, I've got my Zoom it on. So straight away, when you start looking at it, this is the first part of that you will see. And we're going to open our model here. So we click here and we can open our model from a database, and we're going to load it. And I'm going to pick a local instance. So here, local instance, and you can see I've got Garmin. So that's my Power BI report that's on my desktop. It's the only one I've got opened. And I don't need to put a username or password in because it's integrated within my Power BI model. All of my data storage, how I connect to any of my data sets is all stored in my Power BI model. And we've got read write. So there are different options, but within here, I'm going to be able to read and write between. So any changes I make in Tabular Editor, I'm going to push back to my model. You can turn this off if you want to, so you can read and refresh or just read only. And this is quite nice. So if you're working on different models, you can choose a color so that you can see which one is the one that you want to look at. So straight away, you can see as I've loaded, I've got my model has come up from my Garmin table. I've got the tables that we talked about before and I showed you. So you can see it's pulled up these models. I'm straight into my report. And what I'm going to focus on in this presentation, because there is quite a lot to look at, is the expression editor, which will show us how we can use our DAX, our model, our Tom Explorer here. So you can see it's the Tom Explorer, and I'm going to be looking at our properties pane, which is here. So if I start just working through the model, if you have any questions, please just pop them in. So no, you can't apply to a thin report because you need to it needs the data set itself. So on here in data sources, this won't be apparent within the local desktop, and perspectives I'm not going to be looking at here. But when we look at relationships, you can see these are all of the relationships that I have in my report. So you can see the relationships and you can edit the relationships within Tabular Editor. If I had any roles, they would be showing in here. And again, you can look at the roles. And within shared expressions, this is where we have our M code. So if I click on DI Connect Fitness, you can see up here, I've got my M code. So this is showing me the M expression, which is showing me how, how we can connect to how we're connecting, which I think is quite useful when you're looking at something, you're trying to understand why it's doing something. If you can see the M code, then you can see the changes that are made. You can't change the M code as a supported tabular editor. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that there are supported things that we can do in Tabular Editor, which if it breaks, then Microsoft will help fix as part of your support. But if you use unsupported, then these things probably will work, but you're on your own if it goes wrong. And generally, I've not had any issues with it, but the team always advise you to make sure that if you are using unsupported versions, that you save what you're doing. So you always keep a backup copy, which is good practice anyway. So this is our M code. And then we have our tables. And I'm going to go through some of my favorite things to show you, and things I didn't even realize that I missed or I needed until I started using it. So within tables, we have our date table. And what you can do is click on here. So this is up here. This is where the relationships are here. And so what I can do is I can pull my date table in here and then add tables that filter this table where the date tables always at the top, or I can add all related tables. So you can start to use this to understand your relationships. And then I'm not going to look at your question yet, Alexandra, because I'll get distracted, but Johnny will look at it for me. So you can look at these relationships and you can edit the relationships in the report, or this is quite a useful feature if you want to print it off for your documentation. So we can see, and then when you close it, it gives you the option to save. So you can then save it if you want it as part of your documentation, and you can move it around. But what you can also do when you click on your date is you can click on preview data. And this bit I really like. So what we can do, if you, I don't know about you, but when I'm building measures, what I like to be able to is I always want to validate and check what I'm doing. So I can have my date and you can actually pull it out and put it anywhere. So if I wanted, if I've got 2 or 3 different screens, I can have the different screens filled with my table. So I can sort of look between the two of them. And then as I'm writing measures, I can then look at my different reports. So you can place anything wherever you want within this window layout. So if you, and because there's so much that you can do with Tabular Editor, you can build custom layouts for different things, and then you can save them. So you could have one as a default measure, or you can have a Sue default, which is how I like to have it as a default, or you can have your classic layout. So as you're building things, if you're looking at DAX or if you're looking at relationships, then you can basically have a different window view for whatever you're doing, which again is incredibly useful. So we've looked at, so I've got my date here, and I'm just going to pull it over there because I like it to the side. And then the other one I want to show you. So if I go down to summarized activities, and I'm going to preview data here, so I can see all of my data. Now, what I can do, and I want to get straight into building to build DAX for you. So I can right click, create, and I can create a measure, or you can press Alt 1. There's different ways that you can do things. So this one, I'm just going to call count rows. So as I start typing, what you can see is up here, I've got the name, but this properties pane down the bottom, this changes. So it's very, as you click on any object within Tabular Editor, the properties pane changes to reflect that object. So on here, I've got properties, and you can see that it's starting to, it's giving me the properties for my measure. So I've got count rows here, and I press return, and you can see the names here for count rows. And it's currently hidden. I can make it hidden is false, but if I want to hide things, I can change all of the properties here. And as I click on count rows, um, I can then go into the expression editor, which will help me write the DAX. So every single model, and it shows you the measure, but basically I want this one, count rows. And if you click on it, it gives you a really nice message to tell you what this function is and how you use it. So this contains the table containing the rows to be counted. If it's not specified, which I didn't know this, it uses the table that you build the measure in, but I'm going to be specific. I want it in summarize. So as I start typing, it's then helping me, and I use tab to put it in. It's then helping me to make sure that I don't have any problems. And then I press tick, and then that's come in. And you can see here, it said you've made structural changes to the model metadata, which have not been synchronized to analysis services. So what this is saying is we've got our Power BI model on our desktop and we're making changes to it, but we can make lots and lots of changes and then push it back to our model when we're ready to push it back. So at the moment, we've got this count row measures in our summarized activities table. But if I go back to my report and look at summarized activities, you can see this count rows isn't there. I've got rows in summarized, but that's something else. But I haven't got that count rows there. But if I then click on my Tabular Editor, and at the top here, this is where you make the changes to your synchronized data in this particular box here. So if I press this, or you can use Control or S, and then when I go back to my Power BI report, you should see that summarized activities will come up. It hasn't, but it should do. Oh, there it is. It's because I usually put a hashtag in front of it, so it's there straight away, and it wasn't there before. So if we go back to Tabular Editor. Now, that's counting the rows in my summarized activities. I always put a hashtag if it's a number. So just because it'll annoy me if I don't, I'm just putting it in. And it'll then change. So just save it back if I want to. Well, that's going to give me a number. Let's see what the number is. And this is another thing that I really like, the pivot table, because I always used to do this in Excel. So if you click on pivot grid, it opens up this pivot grid. And then what I can do is I can pull my count rows in there. It tells me there's 254. So if I go to summarized activities, you'll see down here, there's 254. So straight away, I know it's only count rows, but it's the principle. I can check. So the thing that I'm really into, I do different sports, but the thing that I'm really into is running. So what you can see, once I've got my table up, I can do things to the table. So here, for example, we've got this little filter, and I use this a lot. So I can click on this and I can then say, right, okay, I'm just interested in running. So when I click at running, I can see it's 145. So I think, well, actually, I might quite like a specific measure for running. So on here, new measure. So I can change it down here if I might want. I might call it number of runs. And then I come back up here, calculate, and I want my hashtag count rows. And I might think, what was it? So it's summarized activities. So summarized activities, activity type. And if you're like me, quite often I forget and I think, what was the actual category that I'm using? And it's running and it's all lowercase. So I go back in. What it's done is it's given me an error, and down here I've got this message. It's saying basically I can't compare a string with something unknown because you haven't told me. I'm like, well, I know I haven't told you because I wanted to check. So now I go back. I do talk to it. Now I can go back and I can tick on tick, and it's nice. It's quite happy with me because there's no red squiggles. But I think, right, well, I want to check I've got it right. So it should be 145. So then what I can do is I can then pull this runs and put it in my pivot table. And it comes up with an error. And you think, well, why is it doing that? I've just told it, it's there, there's no errors. And it's because we haven't synchronized it back to the database. And you have to do this if you want it to work. So once I've synchronized it, it can then pull it back. So it tells me it's 145. So you think, oh, marvelous, lovely. So what you can then do is then think about, well, if you want to then use your pivot grid, which I really like, so on summarized activities, we've got name. So I could go through and put the name on the row fields, and then it'll tell me what I've done and where I've done it, and you can see the different activities and where I've run. And my naming structure isn't particularly great, but you can start to see. And I quite like pivot grid for just being able to visualize and check and understand how I'm building my measures. So it's really incredibly useful. And there's all sorts of things you can do with it. So you can use color scales or icons, and again you can then just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. But if you wanted to then use this as part of your documentation, then you can do so. So I quite like that. So we'll close that. Now, I probably use count rows in every single measure that I do. Oh, and you can also sort, sorry, just so I can remember. So on here, I can sort by activity type as well. So I might not want to actually write count rows in every single thing that I do. So I might want to just do a macro so that I don't have to write count rows every time. So how do I do that? Now, macros are written in C#. So let me just pull it up and which one is it again? That's this one. So a C# script. Now, I'm not a C# programmer. I know enough to be dangerous. But what you can do is there are some really nice resources from the community that are out there. So you can look it up and they're quite straightforward. So you can start to use them. So this is a GitHub repository, and I've got all of these links for you. And it was put together by Power BI Tips. So I know, Mike and Tommy and Seth that are in Power BI Tips, and they know what they're talking about. So my validity is okay. I can understand that. Now, if I look on this create count rows measure, there is a measure that has been written here by Edgar, which basically is being written for me. And what it says is, bring it up and across. It says for each table in selected tables, put some text in to the table name, and then count the rows, number of rows in plus whatever table we've selected, and then count the rows of that table. Format string it as 0, and then put some description in there. So I think, well, that makes sense. I understand that. I know the source. So you can then copy this script here like this, go back to Tabular Editor. Just make sure I bring the chat up. Go back to Tabular Editor. Thank you. And in the C# script, I can write my script there. So what I can do then is I can go through and I can check and highlight using control. So I don't need formatting. I can go through and I can actually then run this script up here, run it. So when we run it, execute, done. It's that quick. So if I go to date, I've then got rows and date table. So it's there straight away. And you think, brilliant, it's there. So what I then can do is once I'm in here and I've got my measure, you can't see it particularly well. So you can save it. So I can then save this measure and it'll ask me, just going to put a demo because I've already got one. And when you look at it, you can see it's a table. So what I have to do is I have to select a table. And because this is based on each object, this macro will only show when you're clicked on the table. So you press, and this is the other bit. Your macros are stored here on your local desktop. So if you're using Power BI Desktop, I use it on my desktop and my laptop. In fact, I've got 2 licenses. So desktop license, and then I've got a remote server thing that I dial into for another customer, and I use it there too. And then I use it on something else as well. So you can go to your local app data Tabular Editor 3 folder, and you can just copy it because it's just text. So copy the text and then pop it into where you've stored it. So it doesn't sync between desktop and laptop because it's your local file and it's on your local machine, but you can easily go in and copy it and then paste it across. So we press OK. And then down here at the bottom, sorry, lots of zoom it for you. Down here at the bottom, there's a macro. So when I click on macros, you'll see these are all the macros that I've got. And I'm going to show you some of these. Count rows demo. So count rows demo is then stored as a macro. And I don't have to write it. In fact, I forget how to do some DAX because I've got them stored as macros. So you look at it and you think, oh, what else can I do? So that's my count rows, that's sorted. And what I might want to then do is I might want to, so if we go back to the Power BI tips site, and we'll see there's lots of different things that we can actually do with our macros. So we can format our DAX, we can auto-generate sum measures, we can change strings, we can drill through, we can create sum measures for selected columns, we can add comments to descriptions. So what I've got is a snippet of tools here that that basically I can use. So this one here, this one, I'm forever changing column. I don't know why they formatted a date as a long day. It just makes no sense to me at all. So what I can do, if I've just copied and pasted it, popped it here, go back to my tabular editor, and we then click. And if we look at dates, you can see here, I've got all of my different dates and they're all set as short date. Let me just check here. So we might have, so when you're looking for something, this is another one of my favorite things. We've got up here in this Tom Explorer, we've got text to search and object type. So if I click on object type, what you can do is you can say, right, I want to show only all of my measures. So I can then click and say, right, show me my measures and press OK. And then it will show you all of your measures. So if you want to then look at columns, so we can take measure off and look at column, I can then put date on here and it will show me all of my dates. So you can see I've got all of my dates here. And if I wanted then to write the script where I can actually choose these, state time. So we'll just do this one actually. So I'm doing control to highlight between one and the other. And then I'll go up here, create a new C# script, copy in my C#, and I want to change that to be a short date. So I press play and you see straight away it changes to a short date. So you can, up here, you can filter by column. You can then filter by date. You can then see all of the date tables within your model. Click on them using control and then run your macro. And that just, I'm forever changing dates. So that just saves time. Just remember to make sure that you take the filter off, because I've tried to find something once and it was like, why is it not there? And this is the other thing. At the top here, there's this tiny little button. Collapse all, collapses everything. So you can then start to build your model out, because sometimes it can get a bit busy once you've got lots of different things there. So that is that one. The other thing that I really like to do is if someone asked about a thin report, when you are building your measures and I know you're very keen on this, Johnny, is documentation. So if you are using your report, what you might want to do, and you publish your report to the service, and then you have someone that is using your report as a thin report, what you want them to be able to do is to understand, or you might want them to be able to do, is to understand how that DAX is built. So you might want them to be able to hover over and see what the actual DAX is, what the name is, what the expressions are. So if we go back to Tabular Editor, you can see at the moment I've got descriptions in there, but what I want to show you is just how easy it is. So on here, I've got a remove description. So if I open it, double click it, and I've put in this, be very careful because this will affect, this is based on the model. So I've said for each variable, M, and M is just, it could be anything, but I've just said for each var M, so it just reminds me it's a measure, in all measures, make the description nothing. So I wanted to do that because quite often if I'm showing this, I then forget that I've not got rid of all the description, and it's run, and then I press save. Then I go back to my model here, and if I then click over it, you can see there's nothing. So I can start afresh. So I can go back to Tabular Editor, and then in here, I've got, so I've saved these, but what you can do is you can create a new script and format all measures using Tabular Editor's own formatting. Oh, hang on, default measure description. I'm getting ahead of myself. So before you want to add your measures description in your measures, you want your DAX formatted so that whoever looks at it can see. So again, we've got this measure, model or descriptions, and this will go through, it's changed it, and basically it's formatted my DAX so that my DAX looks nice. Then what I want to do is I've got another measure here to create a to put my descriptions in. So it's better, see, note to self, better to format DAX before you add it in the description. So basically this goes through and it writes, and it's written by Bernat, who I know who's a genius. And you press play and you then press save. And then when I go back to my model, I then hover over it and you can see I've got some really nice expressions in there, all formatted perfectly. So anyone then that uses my report as a thin data set has got all of the DAX descriptions written in. So that's how easy it is to build that in. Are there any questions before I get on to the next bit? No.
So
No,
that one
no
question
questions.
about hierarchies, but we can maybe answer that at the end because I don't
Yeah.
think it's necessarily a tabular editor question, to be fair.
Okay, no problem. So let me just remember. Hi, Brian. He's up early too. So we've gone through expression editor, Tom, and properties. So I'm going to show you show dependencies. We've looked at a little bit of formatting, but not a huge amount. So when we have our measures, we've got lots of our measures here, and it might be that I decide that I want everything with a percentage or everything with a hashtag as a, see, that should be a percentage. So you can easily go through and change the name of it. If you look at something, you can just go through and then percentage. And this is why it's so important to name things properly. So now if I put in hashtag, I've got everything here that is a hashtag, which is going to be a whole number. So I can go through and in fact, let's make it even simpler. And let's just see our measures. So I've then got all of the measures. And what I can do is I can select as many as I want, and then I can then use the properties down here. You can see where you've got the properties. And I've got the format string. So rather than actually doing the format string on everything, you can then look and you can say, right, okay, I just want a whole number. And what I want from the whole number is, do I want parentheses for negative values? No, I'm not worried. I do want to have 1,000 separator. So I've put that as true. So I then apply that to that property to all of my measures, and it's all done it. So I've got a problem with that one, but I'll fix that later. So that gives us this. And then you think, right, okay, so one of the things that really annoys me, not that much annoys me, but one of the things that really annoys me is every time you try to do something as currency, and I haven't got any currency in here, but we'll just pick this one, for example. So if you pick currency, which is, so it'll be in the format string there. When you click on the format string, and perhaps, for example, I want currency, it always comes up with a dollar sign, which, you know, is what it is. But you can't change it. You have to go through individually and change each one to be a pound. But what you can do is you can write a macro. So in the macro, so for each selected measure, all I've said, for every measure that I select, make the format string this. So make sure it's got a pound in front of it. And I don't like, because most of the numbers I deal with are currency-wise are quite high. I don't usually have decimals. So I've set it so it's got a pound, it's got the comma, and it has no decimal point. So it's a whole number. And that then is something that I will then run on all of my data sets. The other thing that you can do, if we pick month over month, for example, we can, if you right click on it, is that not showing? What have I done? Oh, we'll just save it back a minute. So just going to get rid of this for a minute because I'm not quite sure why it's, oh, it's got a format string attached to it. So when you click on the expression editor, which has gone where? So window, just go back to my default layout, and expression editors there. So this month to date, if you get an error, you'll see here it comes up with a little red cross. And when you look at it, it'll tell you what the error is. So it was telling me the error when I tried to save it. It was telling me it's got a format string property and a format string definition property, which is not supported. So if I go into format string up here, it's got that in there. So once I get rid of that, that should then save it and it gets rid of it, and then I'm good to go. So I'm just going to clear these up a little bit a minute because I want to show you. So you can save your scripts. So if you want to save them, then you can do. So let me just clear this up because I just want to show you a couple more things. When you are using something like month on month, what you can do is, this is really handy, show dependency. So if you're trying to look at your models and do you need something and what's it related to, if you click on show dependencies, it comes up with this. And this is really useful. So it'll show you everything that depends on that measure and everything on which this depends. So if we open it up, you can see that this depends on the percentage of month over month to date depends on the number of activities month to month. But then if I open it up, it'll show me the measures that it depends upon and how they're written and what they're written with. So you can get a really nice understanding of how your measures actually then work together. And this is particularly handy when we go into best practice analyzer, which I'll go into in 2 minutes. I just want to show you one more thing. So within, and I have got till 10, I'm going to finish at 10:10 if that's okay, Johnny, because that then gives 5 minutes. Is that the correct, that's the correct time, isn't it?
You've got right to 1/4 if you want to, because there's a 15-minute break between all sessions.
All right, okay, cool.
So take your time, Sue.
Ah, good, lovely. I've got loads. So at the top here, you know, when you first start working in Power BI, there's DAX and there's M, and I was forever looking up, you know, trying to understand how I was going to do something in M, but it's how you then, but it was then in DAX, and it's the same within Tabular Editor. I was trying to write C# scripting in a DAX editor. So there are two things. So you can write scripts in C#, but you can also write it in, make sure I pick the right one. You can also write it in DAX. So if we then go, and let's pick these measures here. So, and I'm just using Shift, select them all, going up the top here, and that's DAX query. So you can use a DAX query and you can use a DAX script, and I won't have time to go through all of these, but if I look, I can write a DAX script using a DAX script, or I can then look at all of these and I can script it in DAX. And isn't this genius? It just pulls out all of the DAX for these particular scripts. So what you can do is if you've built your measures for one model and then you need to put them into another model, but there's a slight change in the table name, or there's a slight, they maybe have called it dates instead of date, and you can't change it, then you pull out all of your DAX, and then you can do Control H, which will bring you up your text editor, and it'll allow you to find something. So if I wanted to find date and change it to dates, I could just put date and I could replace it with dates. And then it would look through the whole thing and replace it for me. And then you can then either just apply it, or you can apply it to a selection, or you can apply it and then sync. So you've got ways that you can do batch editing to your DAX measures as quickly as you can with your C# scripting, which is really handy if you just want to take, some of your measures and then pop them over onto another model. And you can have more than one version of Tabular Editor open at the same time. So that's really handy to understand the DAX scripting. And you can also, using the DAX queries, if you've got your Power BI model, so I might run out of time and I'll probably go a little bit. So if you go into a DAX query, you can actually use your performance analyzer, which is here, and then you can start recording. So I don't know, refresh. And then if we go to this one, for example, I can then copy the query and go into here, and then I can then pop in the DAX query. And that will then enable me to see the DAX query, and then I can run the DAX query, and I can work with DAX queries in Tabular Editor, which will then help with my DAX debugging. What I want to do is I just want to show you Performance Analyzer, because there's a huge amount and I've only got 50 minutes, and there is a phenomenal course that is free that I will point you towards as well. So I said at the beginning that this actually helps you with your DAX and your model. So it's helping us become automatic with scripting by C#. It's also helping us understand our formatting, how we can bulk create things, how we can edit things, how we can create measures, how we can validate, how we can actually, good for DAX for paginated reports. Yeah, it's another one of the things I really like. We can filter down our columns, so we can apply formatting to different things. So it does all of these things. But I also said at the beginning, it helps us with our data model. So there are best practice rules which have been written, and I'll probably pronounce Michael Kowalski, who's a senior program manager at Microsoft. And he's basically listed some of the rules that really, as developers, we should follow to try and ensure that our Power BI models are best practice, follow best practice, and are efficient and valid, etc. So what we can do is we can import all of the rules that he suggested into our tabular model. And I've lost, let me just, best practice analyzer. So let me just show you. I've got all of the links to these. So we can then we can bring in our best practice analyzer into Tabular model, and it's really easy to do. And as you can imagine, there is a macro for that. So I will show you the macro. Best practice. Can't see it. Ah, here it is. It's because I called it BPA. So, and it's really straightforward, but you can also go onto the website and do it, and it'll download the best practice rules from Microsoft. And once you import those, and because of the timing, I've already done it, but it is really, honestly, it's really easy to do. In here, you can see down at the bottom, and I haven't cleaned this up because I wanted to leave it for you. There are 229 best practice issues. You think, oh, why is this? So when we look, you can see here things like no two measures should have the same definition. So we should only have one measure doing one thing. So don't summarize numeric objects. Well, that's, when it brings it in and it calls it auto sum. So what it does here, it's got a little screwdriver. So if the screwdriver is showing up, then what that means is that it can do it for you. So if the screwdriver is showing up, it'll fix it for you. So I click at that, and what it's saying is my day of the week has got a summary. So if I was to pull it into my Power BI report, it would try to add it up, where Sundays or Mondays 1, 2, etc. It would try and add them up, and my month offset. None of these I want summarized. So you apply the fix, and it does it for you. Look. 221. So how cool is that? So I just save that back to my model, and then it says hide foreign keys. So on here, some of my foreign keys, if you're creating a relationship, it's best practice that you hide the foreign key in the table, the fact table generally, or whichever key it is. So again, you click up here, and because this is dead easy for it, it doesn't need any human input. You can just apply the fix, and it applies the fix, and my number's down. It says provide a format string. Yes, I should apply a format string. So it will do that. And it's running through my model for me and actually looking at them and saying, you haven't got a format string. Now this one, provide a format string for these measures, the screwdriver hasn't come up because it doesn't know what I want to format it as. So it's not, if there is a response that it was required, then it won't do it for me. So I don't know why they can't. If I've got a hashtag, it should be a number. That's automatic, isn't it? But maybe that's not a Microsoft best practice. So what you can do though is you can then click on it and you can apply the measure if you want. So you can apply the fix if you want. And then we flip back to our best practice analyzer, and it might just then say relationship columns should be of the same data type. So I look at this and I think date, training history. So what's wrong with training history? So I go over to my Tom Explorer, I get rid of this, I might put in history. See, it's come up. Hasn't come up with the column, so I might just then I've probably got a see, that's why you have to take the thing off. Now if I put in history, learn from my mistakes, training history. Oh, it's not showing me. I tell you why it's not showing. It's because I've hidden it, so when it's showing, it's not hidden. So you're able to then go through your best practice analyzer and actually then go through and look to see what the problem is. So it's saying here, no two measures should have the same definition. So count rows, I know, is the same as summarized activities. But what I can do is I can then go to that activity, make sure if it doesn't show up that you've got everything selected. So when I go to my count rows, if we go back to our best practice, go to object, count rows, I can then say, right, okay, show me my dependencies. There's no oh yeah, so there is a dependency, hashtag runs. So I wouldn't want to actually be able to, it's because I had it filtered in the pane, Johnny. I wouldn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to delete that because the number of runs would break, but actually it's something that I've got already in number of runs. So I can just delete it because it's just for an example. So you can easily delete and then save back. And if you make a mistake, you can press Control Z to go back. So what I have done is I have shown you basically how the layout of the window runs, the expression editor with Tom and the properties, how to create dependencies from your model, how to find and replace if you're using the DAX editor, how to show data, from your tables, how to filter your tables, how to format measures, and that applies to columns, etc. as well. How you can create folders in the properties, I'll just show you that, how to use the pivot grid, macros, DAX queries, and best practice. Just to show you the folders bit. So if I have a measure here in properties, you can actually put the display folder in there. So you can show the display folder, which then shows you can put all of your measures. So you can actually drag and drop your measures and pop them into there. And current slide. Let me just go back to my, because I just want to show you. Yeah, local model. So what I've done is I've explained to you what it is. You should have an idea of how much it will cost, who uses it and why, and hopefully it's then given you the confidence just to pull down Tabular Editor 2 and start. Tabular Editor 3, I think you get for free version for 30 days as well. These are all of the resources. So everything that I've shown you, I've got links to.